would have been savior when I read this book. I think it should be said, but because you have a lot of friends here in Poland, here in this room, and many people in Poland, in Polish politics, Polish social life, share your beliefs about the role of history, the role of traditional national identity. So we are very grateful for those you are doing in your country politics, because this is the kind of politics is the kind of politics we need in Europe as whole. But I have two major questions. First, role of the state in support of family. You have very huge problems in demography as we have in Poland. You've done some changes in fiscal, in other areas that are affecting family position. Please, I will be very grateful if you describe why this is so important and what is the most important of things you've done in this area. And the second question is, what are the most major common areas of interest between Poland and Hungary nowadays? I forgot to say I'm a member of Polish Parliament, so
he's from the opposition. Yeah. He's from the opposition.
So the point is very clearly, as an answer to your second question, that we live very similar geographical position. So we believe between the Russians and the Germans. That's so simple. So on one side we have the Germans, the other side the Russians. We try to do good policies, reasonable one, to both directions and so on, but basically this is a fact. If somebody say that this fact has no relevance, it's against the history. So therefore we are Central Europeans. Looking back the history, we suffered a lot because Central Europe was not strong enough to defend itself, to create alliances with each other and so on. So I think, regardless that we belong to the European Union, we have consolidated relations to the Russians. We are living where we are living. So therefore, one of the most important point on the agenda, as I see it, to build up Central European cooperation as deep as possible. In terms of security, logistics, trade, so we have to create a living, strong, economically strong Central Europe. And then, of course, we have to run a very clever, well-balanced politics as part of the European Union to the Germans, and another kind of politics, but reasonable similarly, to the Russians. But the core of this whole policy is strong Central Europe. Hungary is a 10 million country. Poland is bigger, but if you compare yourself with the others, you have some problem as well. So we have to understand it. And if you are weak, it's not a way how you can defend yourself. Weakness is not the answer. Weakness is the problem. So therefore, we have to have a strong cooperation of the Central European countries. It's well-based. Emotionally is okay. We are discussing that point. Explaining deeper things, we understand why we are here. Historically, it's okay. We have heroes. Common heroes in both directions. So I think it's a good possibility. The first point is family. Hungary is in trouble in that respect. 42% of the newly born kids are born not in family. I mean, not in couples who are married to each other. 42%. And then there is a demographic decline as well. So we should do something, no question of that. But this is a point when we have to be very careful. The Hungarians are very complicated people. You can't imagine how difficult to govern them. So 10 million freedom fighters every day. And that in the Hungarian mind, there's a special sensory, which is not related to political issues, just because being Hungarian. Whether somebody, whether it's the government, the Russian, whatever, anybody, would like to interfere in my private life or not. This is the number one question. Based on the researches of value system of the nations, the Hungarians are the 5th most individualistic nation of the world. Just after the Anglo-Saxon nations, we are the number 1. So that kind of, freedom-defending approach of the Hungarian people is very, very strong. My house is my castle. My life is my life. My decision is my decision, even with the proud. So it's very difficult anyway, but at the same time we have strong national feeling. I like that combination. It's difficult, but I like that composition, freedom and nation, that's good. But basically, the problem is that when we would like to create a more family-based politics, there is a double reaction of the people. They think it's okay, because we see the figures, and we saw the families. But at the same time, whether the government would not like to interfere, to force us to certain direction, more pro-family. If they have a feeling that the government would like to push the families or the individuals to the family, they reject it. When we are able to say, it's just a possibility, please consider the possibility, they are ready to accept it. So we have to be very, very cautious because of the settle of the values of the Hungarians. I'm absolutely running a policy which is pro-family, no question. Even in the constitution, it's very clear-cut. The human life should be defended from the very first moment of being, existing. So that's written in the constitution. The second, the Hungarian government must be in favor of the life. Third, family is very, very positive, and family would be just a couple, one man, one woman, that's over. So that's very clear. I could be proud for that, but it was created not by me, but even in the middle of the 90s, the Hungarian Constitutional Code made a decision saying that family means just one man, one woman. So it's not an innovation of the new government, actually. It's innovation of the God, but anyway, beyond that, it's an innovation of the 90s, So it was what we have done, nothing else. Just the Constitutional Code decision was written into the Constitution, which is important anyway. And that's one of the reasons why we are attacked. Politics is complicated. I would not like to criticize anybody, but when you live in a way, you feel somehow, could I say moral or internal, at least internal motivation to organize the world around you as you live. That's the problem. That's the problem. So therefore we must be very much pro-family. Otherwise those who organize differently their personal life will convince us that we should organize our life differently as well. That's nothing. So it's a danger. Be careful with that.
Okay. Michał Orzechowski, journalist. Just very shortly, 2 questions. One, can you admit that you get some inspirations from with your activity today, internally, like outside, with dealing with other countries like Russia, and also internally when you make reforms, getting rid of the old and putting some new people? I mean, did you get inspiration from exactly 2 countries and some leaders of it, Poland and Georgia? If you get with your, like Saakashvili, what he did with this new generation. And the second question, I know that you cannot interfere into other countries like Poland life. Public life, but can you share some experience how Polish opposition can go around or go through the very big blockade of media, money, political power, and some Euro fundamentalists who are blocking the opposition to go through the, like, what was the secret of your success, going through or going around? Thank you.
The first question is very simple. I mean, 56 was a motivation for the Central Europe coming from Hungary. We are proud of it. But at the same time, we must be aware of the fact that from the 70s, the motivation came from Poland to all the Central European countries. So the real locomotive of freedom fight and national sovereignty fight was Poland. Back to even 86 to the universities, so, sorry, 68 to the universities. Back to the 70, to the workers, then 76, the core, workers' self-defending committee whatsoever, and then Solidarność. So, therefore, an anti-communist attitude political movement obviously considered Poland as an example. No question of that. Today, it's more complicated. First of all, we respected the figures and the results, especially in comparison with the other regional countries. So what the Polish people has done in the recent years is outstanding. I can imagine that you are critical to that, but if you look at the figure, it's obvious, you know. You still have economic growth and Hungary suffered a building that. But politically speaking, the right, I mean the central right and the right, is constituted in a different way here in Poland and in Hungary. If I try to describe like a map, may I say that you have peace and you have the Prime Minister party. So those guys who are like peace people, but are still ready for cooperation and are radicals, but you know, common sense is important for them. So not those radicals who are over all the rationalities, because we have that kind of radicals as well in our societies, but those who are radicals but accepting the common sense. So that kind of peace person in Hungary belongs to our political family. So therefore, we are more rightist, may I say, in that way, than the Polish governing party. On the other side, those semi-socialist, liberals, business-oriented guys who are part of the Prime Minister party here are not part of our political community in Hungary. So therefore, you know, when we speak right, it's not the same geography on the political map in Hungary than here. Because those guys who are more business-oriented, liberal, semi-socialist guys, let's say leftist liberals, created their own party in Hungary. They were never part of the central right. They had their own so-called liberal party. And they got huge support in the last 20 years, except the last election, when they were not able to reach the 5% threshold and remained out happily enough, as we say, from the Hungarian parliament. So we are happy with that. They disappeared, but they never joined our political community. So therefore, the unified right in Hungary, which based on human dignity, Christianity, family, freedom, a little bit more rightist in Hungary on the political map than in Poland. That's the point. And that's the reason why, because it's wide enough in Hungary, it's wide enough, it was able to collect 2/3, I can't say the votes, but 2/3 of the seats in the Hungarian parliament. So that's the job what I have done. In '94, Fidesz, our political community, got 7% of the election. And if the election campaign would have been 2 weeks more or longer, we would out of the parliament. We would have been out of the parliament. That was a very difficult campaign for them. But we somehow stayed in. And then the conservative government lost the election, and we started to rebuild the right. And just 4 years later, in '98, we won the election. So it was 4 years when we built up the first attempt to create a rightist, center-right political family. And then in 2002, we lost the election for several reasons. One of the reasons was that we haven't answered clearly the real question, what kind of political parties could be competitive in the future in the European politics. It was 10 years ago, probably it's difficult to remember that, but 10 years ago in the European politics it was open what kind of political parties we'll have in the future. Internet parties, network parties, membership parties, American type, you know, just for election supporting parties or what. And our party did not make the proper decision. We haven't made any decision. We ran for the election as we were. And then we lost it, because the socialists had given a very good answer. Old-type membership-based parties are still relevant in the future. And we lost the election. And then I got that lesson and lecture, and in the forthcoming, I mean, after 2002, the next 8 years, we built up a traditional, party-based, strong mobilization capacity, network party, which is far the strongest now in the Hungarian landscape. So our membership is enormous, our supporters are enormous. If I send a letter, let's say in the constitution question, I send a questionnaire to the Hungarian people, to all the 8 million people. We have 8 million voters anyway. I send 8 million letters to the voters with 13 questions or 14 questions related to the constitution. What should be written into? And I got back out of 8 million, more than 1 million letters. You know, I have that, our political family has that kind of letter, which is membership-based and strong. So without having, you know, cemented into the society, even in the future politics, you can't be successful. People are still important, not just as voters, but as individuals and actors as well. And you have to ask them to be part of your movement. If they are not part of your movement cannot be successful. And then we reach your second question. And if they are not involved into your activity, they will be guided always by media. And media is media. Media, everybody is liberal. Media is always open for innovation, as they call it. We are more traditional party, you know, it's never for us. So therefore, if you would not like to rely on the opinion of media about yourself, you must build up your structure. Look at what's going on in many West European countries. Many conservative parties in Europe must represent a far more leftist-oriented or liberal-oriented opinion just because the media is the only instrument by through they can deliver their messages. And they adjusted themselves, you know, to the media. This is not a normal way of life. It's not in favor of democracy. So therefore, you must have a strong network, personal network, news network, information network, to counterbalance what's going on in the communication area. And then, if you are strong enough, you should not be shy. You must be straightforward in that point. And you should say, it's not healthy for the society if only one kind of approach to the life is represented in the media. And you must find, let's say, traditionally oriented business persons to create media. If they don't do that, how can we compete? The state will never create, because it will be always questioned from the position of democracy, rightly. Whether if you are in a governmental position, you know, to run a government based and supporting the public media, it's always, you know, we have all temptation of that, of course. But, you know, people don't like it. We have to be aware of that. So if you would like to create a counterbalance to the leftist liberal media through the state channels, you are lost. You can't do that. People will not support it. Bribery is very close to that. So don't do that. Instead of that, you have to build up the private base on talented person-run journals, papers, radio, TV, and whatsoever. We must be competitive in the market competition of media as well. If you are out of that field, we have just limited chances. And don't be shy. If you have instruments for that, if you have businessmen for that, if you can create good environment in regulation by the parliament, just do it. Otherwise, always the leftist liberals will dictate what is right and what is bad. And it's not good for us. So believe me, the best way to be competitive even in that field. I think that's the lesson, at least in Hungary, and I would be not surprised if the lesson would be something similar from Poland as well.
Grzegorz Senatorski, Medical University of Warsaw and Nazareth Crusade for Motherland in Poland. The opinion of many people in Poland is that transformation in Hungary was possible due to big national prayer for motherland, and Cardinal Peter Erdo has called Hungarian people to pray for Hungary, and we are on the stage that we must exorcise our parliament, and we did this at our national day, 11th of November. and it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you, Mr. Premier Minister, to Holy Mass in Budapest at 16 March at 10 o'clock to St. Stephan's, and we will pray for thanks for our sense in history of Poland and Hungary. And if I may, I give you this welcome
invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, the point is, thank you very much. You know, we are very often ready to criticize the Americans in political life, or not publicly because it's not allowed anyway, but just among us. But if I take your sentence, you know, in Europe, if you say that you cannot be successful in politics without praying, you are, at least in Brussels, but in many other capitals as well, you are misunderstood, or at least perceived as stupid guy who belong to the past, you know, don't understand the modern world. If America, somebody would like to say that without praying, we could be successful, we could have a successful political life, you know, that would be strange. So, you know, the real spiritual network and roots of any public activity is America, is clearly there, and in Europe we lost it. So that's a very, how to say, deep historical process which should be analyzed. The second point is, in Hungary, we must be very careful with the proper understanding of Christianity and in relation Christianity and politics, because only 14% of the Hungarians are going to church every week at least one time. 14, not 40, 14. And one occasion per year, 40%. So this is the Hungarian situation in relation with the church and that kind of, how to say, relation. Plus to that, we should know that if you ask the Hungarians whether you are a believer, we had a census just recently, very interesting one. It's very high number saying yes. And if they ask the Hungarians, you are a believer as you think so, or as in prayed or educated and pronounced by the church, you know, those who say, I am a believer as the church said it, following the guidelines of the church, is very, very limited. So the majority of the Hungarian society is somehow has a sense and relation to God and that kind of strata of the life, but at the same time don't run the churches. Very interesting phenomenon. So I think if somebody would like to run purely Christian democratic politics in Hungary, we'll never get the majority. And this is the greatest challenge, and I'm concluding now, this is the greatest challenge for the Christian Democrats in politics now, and believers in the politics, because if you can't pronounce the trust, what the hell would you like to get the majority? What the purpose of that? But if you speak only about truth, and this is not enough to collect the majority, how will you achieve your program? So majority and trust, truth and majority. This is the most interesting dilemma of the European Christian politicians. And you have to find your own answer, and your party should find an answer. Otherwise, you could be a good man, but never get a majority. Or you could get a majority, but you will never be a good man. So you must somehow mix up the two things. It's very difficult anyway, especially when the surrounding so often hostile to your approach. So it's very, very difficult question. And one of the reasons why we are not successful enough in the European politics and in Christian democracy is that we haven't clarified that question.
Unfortunately, I get signs that Donald Tusk, Angela Merkel, and François Hollande are waiting for you.
Thank you very much for being here.